Hello,
He's Oliver,
she's Lucy,
and you're listening to Anyway Movies,
the podcast of film fanatics and movie maniacs.
the podcast of discussions, debates, and occasional distractions as we talk about all things cinema.
If you like what you hear, be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on podcasting platforms.
Big shout out to my sister Molly for creating the logo and images for our podcast. Give her a follow on Instagram at _Molly_Joanne_.
Now that's all out of the way, dim the lights, turn the projector on, and let's start the episode. Hi Lucy.
Hello, Oliver.
Boy, do we have an episode today.
I am looking forward to this so much. Honestly, it's all I can think about ever since we came up with the idea. It was just meant to be.
Bit of background context. One of the first ideas we ever had when talking about the podcast was reviewing bad movies that are so bad they're just brilliant. There was really only one movie that we could do to start that idea off.
It couldn't have been any other movie. It couldn't.
And it just so happens that that one movie has a movie that goes along with it. So today is a 2-for-1 special. We've gotten very good at putting more than one movie into an episode, haven't we?
We have got very good at it. Yeah.
So without further ado, ladies, gentlemen, non-binaries out there, we give you The Room and The Disaster Artist.
Right. So basically for the first half of the episode, we're going to be talking about The Room. And then the second part, we're going to be talking about The Disaster Artist. So I hope you're all excited. Buckle up, peeps.
Well, we can't start talking about the movie without talking about Mr. Tommy Wiseau himself. It's Polish, apparently.
Polish?
According to Google, he is from Poland.
Your very advanced Google search. Your very advanced Google search of Tommy Wiseau.
Well, I was curious because
Well, you learn something new every day.
in The Disaster Artist, it's played up that no one actually knows where he's from.
No.
So I was curious to know where he was from, and he's from a place called, I'm going to butcher this name, Poznan, Poland. So yeah, Tommy Wiseau, writer, director, starring actor of what is widely considered to be one of the worst movies ever made, The Room, coming out in 2003. Lucy, your thoughts?
Well, it's not a good movie, is it?
No. But it's hilarious.
It is wildly entertaining. I have to admit, it's so funny. It's not the vibe that he was going for, and I kind of feel a bit bad, but it's just the way the wind blows. But it's one of those films that is really terrible, but it's really fun to watch in a way.
I implore you all to, if you've never seen The Room, you've just got to watch it once in your life because it's such an experience.
It is an experience, and I feel like the internet has sort of ruined it because I think every single person knows every quote now, even if they've never seen it.
Well,
they just know all of the jokes.
It very much became a meme before memes were even a thing.
Yeah, I mean, it was 2003, so this was before the internet sort of boomed in a way.
Yeah.
So imagine if this had come out 5 years later, 10 years later.
I don't think it would have done as well.
Really?
I think it would. I feel like if it had come out 5-10 years later, it would have come out at a time when like the MCU was happening and other big budget blockbuster films, so it would become very unnoticed.
And people would just call it a bad film, whereas 2003 standards, it was so bad that people just clung onto it for dear life.
Like, it's got a cult following of which I have never seen the likes of before.
Oh, I know. It is absolutely insane. I wish we had The Room rewatches over in the UK,
That would be
but
something.
we don't.
The Room is. What's it about, Lucy?
The Room is about a guy called Johnny, played by Tommy Wiseau, and he finds out that his fiance is having an affair with his best friend called Mark.
Yeah.
I was gonna call him Greg, but he's called Mark. And in a fit of rage, he makes chicken noises and shoots himself in the head.
The end.
That's The Room, everybody.
You literally didn't miss anything from just those, like, 3 sentences.
You really didn't. Oh, also, there's a heartfelt backstory in which Johnny's girlfriend's mum is diagnosed with breast cancer. And honestly, that storyline is so drawn out and so it's really deep. It hits in the heart. It really does. It's mentioned once and then never again. But the scene in which she tells her about her illness is just. I'm not gonna lie to you. I cried, Oliver.
You're not dying, Mom. I got the test results back last week. It's definitely breast cancer.
I mean, I'm sorry. I am so sorry, but there wasn't an option for a second take.
Why that scene alone didn't win the movie any awards is beyond me. My personal favourite scene was the scene on the roof when Denny is like Johnny's adopted kid. It's sort of mentioned, but it's said in a way that makes it sound like he wanted to but never did, but he still looks after him.
Yeah, I never understood that relationship because Denny is about 17 and Tommy is a full-grown adult.
But yeah, Denny apparently out of nowhere has suddenly owes a drug dealer money, and the drug dealer, who may actually be the best actor in the whole film, like he was playing it very straight. He was really giving it his all.
Yeah, he'd clearly not seen any of the other scenes in the film. He just turned up for that one day and had no idea what they'd done beforehand, and he was given the performance of an absolute lifetime, bless him.
And then they drag the drug dealer away. They take him to the police themselves, whilst Lisa, Johnny's fiance, and her mum are trying to calm Denny down by shouting in his face, asking him why was a drug dealer holding a gun to his head, and he's like, I owe him some money. What money, Denny? What kind of money? Why was I not cast in this part?
Because you were about 5.
4, actually.
I don't know math.
But that was the scene where I was like, nah, this is the best thing I've ever watched.
My personal favourite scenes were the football scenes because not only were they not playing football, they were just throwing the ball around like you would to a 6-year-old. But they were also wearing tuxedos. Like, they were fully dressed up for the Oscars to just throw a ball to each other in the middle of an alleyway. I mean, I don't know if that was meant to make them look cool, but it really didn't. It just kind of looked like a few guys who got drunk at prom and found a ball on the side of the road and just decided to play with it. Who greenlit those scenes? Who read that in the script and was like, oh, cinematic genius this is. Just dudes catching balls,
As
as you do. But can we just talk about the fact that Greg Sestero is the only one trying in this film? Like, he isn't great, granted, but he at least looks like he's taking it a little bit seriously. And in a way that is sort of humbling, whereas Tommy Wiseau is taking it too seriously, which I think makes it funnier. I think it's kind of genius on his part.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't what he was going for, but you can definitely read it into it that way.
My question is, in the first scene where we see Mark, the phone call between him and Lisa, it's like he's 3 lines behind what's happening.
The script is just all over the place, but that's what makes it kind of funny.
Like, Lisa's saying these lines like, oh, I miss you, baby. Oh, I want to get away. And then Mark's on the phone like, what are you talking about? Like, the affair on his side hasn't happened yet, even though it actually has. Like, we can't do that. Johnny's my best friend. And she's there, oh, I miss you and I want you. And I'm like,
is Lisa okay?
Her mum's got breast cancer, she's not.
There's no character arc for the mum at all. She's only in about 2 scenes in the whole film, 3 scenes maybe. Why introduce a plot development like that and just brush it under the carpet?
I want to know why none of the characters take the. Lisa flat out says Johnny hits her, and no one seems to care.
Yes. Oh my God, I forgot about
Lisa
that.
was definitely. Well, Lisa was lying, but that's not the point. Her mum was just like, but he's got money.
Yeah.
He's financially taking care of you. And Lisa's like, I don't love him anymore. And he hit me. Yeah, but he's got money.
Tone deaf are the words you're looking for.
Yeah. And then she's talking about it with her best friend. And she says, Johnny hit me. Her best friend goes, what? Like, finally, a normal reaction. And then straight away, she's like, but you can't break up with him because he's got money.
Those friends never made sense to me. They were just kind of always in the house for no reason. Like, did they have a key?
They did. There was a line, I'm pretty sure, where. Or was it just Denny that had the key?
Unless he gave the key to them. I don't know. Maybe Johnny's house is just free reign. Everyone can come in if they want. But the friends never did anything. They were just sort of there when the plot needed them. It was actually
they had the iconic line, chocolate is the symbol of love. Also, like, new characters just kept getting added as the story went on.
Yeah.
And then, out of nowhere, at the very end of the movie, during the party scene, a random unnamed friend who's apparently been a part of this friendship group the whole time, who we are only now just seeing, and again is unnamed, is the only one that seems to be taking anything seriously. Like,
maybe that was the only day they could get him to film.
Like, but his character was the only one calling out Lisa's bullshit and telling her that is not on. You need to sort this out because you are the one who is not only ruining yourself and Johnny, but you are going to ruin our whole friendship group. And I'm like, where was this energy at the start of the film when it was needed?
No, it was very clear that this whole film was to stroke Tommy Wiseau's ego.
In more ways than one.
I'm deleting this episode.
We've avoided it for as long as we have. I think we need to talk about.
We really don't need to talk about it, but we kind of do.
So, like, half the movie is sex scenes?
If anyone's got up to this far in the episode and still hasn't seen The Room or The Disaster Artist, just a word of warning. Don't watch this with your parents. Just don't. I don't really like sex scenes anyway. They just sort of make me a bit uncomfortable. But these ones were just horrible.
Okay, I have multiple questions. Not for you, just in general, putting them out there. First of all, whose foreplay consists of pillow fighting? Second of all, why, when they were having sex, was he aiming for her belly button? Thirdly, why was he pinching rose petals off and just sprinkling them on her body?
Yeah, did he get the rose petals from the florist?
Oh, hi, Johnny. I didn't recognize you. You're my favorite customer.
The pillow fighting just before the sex scene kind of reminded me of an advert for a bed. But that is which way it reminded me of. I was like, this is which way commercial acting. Because it was just so awkward.
But it went from 0 to 100 really quickly.
But not only that, but it goes on for a very
Yeah.
long time as well.
The first sex scene from when Denny leaves and they first start making out and so on is 3 minutes exactly of just that whole scene.
Overall, we can just call this film an absolute disaster piece.
I did a little bit of research. So the budget for the room was estimated to be 6 million.
Jesus.
The box office was 4.978 million.
Wow. Imagine buying a ticket.
Here's the interesting thing. So its IMDb score is 3.7 out of 10, and it got a 9 meta score out of 100. Its Rotten Tomatoes score, 83%.
83%.
And the Rotten Tomato has more reviews on it than IMDb does for the Metascore, like the critic reviews. So there.
It's really weird how it caused such a phenomenon by just being a bad film. It kind of gives any filmmaker hope that if your first film is really bad, then chances are it could start something else.
And that's why we have Netflix movies.
The Room really did start something in cinema. It just kind of changed people's perspective of how to make an actual film good. And people started having more of an awareness for actual good movies at that time. I mean, think of it this way. It came out in 2003. Same year as Lord of the Rings Return of the King. It had to be compared.
How? How do you compare that?
You don't. I think that's the answer. I mean, it is very entertaining.
It is.
I'll give it that. And watching videos about it is really entertaining as well. It's strangely very interesting how it all came about.
But it didn't end up doing what it was set out to do, and it didn't get the recognition that Tommy Wiseau may have hoped for. It definitely did start something, and it's become a very well-known movie. Even if you're not part of the cult following, people know about it.
Yeah, everybody knows what The Room is.
And like you said before, like people will know like the one-liners or standout parts of this movie without even seeing it because it's just talked about so much online and stuff. And because of this movie, a critically acclaimed one came out in 2017, which I guess leads us on to The Disaster Artist.
The Disaster Artist is a 2017 film, and it's all about how The Room came to be. And it has James Franco as Tommy Wiseau and Dave Franco playing Greg Sestero. And the first point I wanted to make is it took me not very long to forget that they were related.
The funny thing about that is, I didn't realize that Dave Franco was in it alongside James. So watching the movie, when I realized it was him, that was all I could think about was, oh, they're brothers.
Very opposing opinions then, because like obviously I knew that they were both in the film, but I was actually quite worried that I wasn't going to get past the fact that they're brothers and they look alike in a way. But I think they made James just look so different from
Yeah.
himself that I think it worked.
It wasn't that I couldn't, it's not that I could take them, their characters and the fact that they were brothers in real life apart. Like watching the film, I wasn't watching it thinking like, they're just brothers, they're just playing it, you know what I mean?
Mm.
But it was just the fact that because I didn't realize that Dave was in it, so when I realized he was in it, all I could think of was that fact.
Second of all, I think it's safe to say that The Disaster Artist is definitely a better film than The Room.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
definitely.
I just kind of like how they made Tommy a bit sympathetic. I actually felt a bit sorry for him. I wasn't expecting that.
I really didn't like him.
Really.
I felt so bad for Greg.
To be fair, yeah.
Like Greg, at the start of the film, he's very relatable for us too,
Mm.
as aspiring actors and taking that leap of faith and really sort of putting himself out there. And also like the fear and struggling with belief and all that kind of things. But like he was always very patient with Tommy, even when Tommy was ultimately in the wrong. He still gave him lenience and still tried his best to look out for him until it got to the point where he just couldn't anymore. Like everyone needs a friend like Greg, is all I'm saying.
They really do. I mean, the only reason why I sympathise so much with Tommy is mainly the scene where people are laughing at his film. Obviously, all the way through the film, I thought he was being a giant turd. Because, like you've just said, Greg was being the best friend, and Tommy was sort of flinging him to the side as if he didn't matter. I mean, don't you realise that Greg was the only person who gave you the time of day when everybody else laughed in your face and said no? And I think in that scene where everyone's laughing at his film and he thinks that it's bombed and he's worked so hard and put all this money into it, I did feel a little bit bad because, you know, as you were saying before, as an aspiring actress myself, it must be heartbreaking to have worked on something that you genuinely thought was good and then people don't like it and laugh at it instead and not give you the reaction that you were hoping for. But hearing you make your stance for Greg, I get it.
Well, I couldn't feel sorry for him, especially after what he did on set.
Yes. Yeah,
Like,
I couldn't believe the behaviour. I mean, this is why this whole thing is so interesting because people look at The Room, the actual film The Room, and just think, haha, it's a bad film, it's just awful, let's watch it for a laugh. And when you really get to nitty gritty, the actual making of it is a lot darker than you think.
yeah,
It wasn't all happy and joyful behind the scenes.
that was one thing I personally struggled with whilst watching The Disaster Artist was the tone of it kept shifting quite drastically.
Yeah, yeah.
And going into a movie expecting it to be, well, it's labeled as a comedy drama. So so both of those elements are definitely in this film. But like through the whole of the first half of the film, it's predominantly making fun, one-liners, and the general feel of it is very uplifting because even in the moments when it's like, oh, I want to give up, there's the other character that's like, no, we're here to keep on top of each other, to push each other and build each other up. And there was all this sort of hopeness and humor throughout the whole of the first part, and then it just got really dark and heavy out of nowhere, and then it got really light and funny again, and then it got really dark and heavy again, and I'm like, I had to take breaks whilst watching it just because I needed time to catch up to what the feel of the moment was. What do you think?
When I first watched it, I thought it was going to be terrible because I thought it was just going to be a really bad Tommy Wiseau impression, and it was just going to make fun of everything. It was going to do the obvious jokes. It was going to do, like the obvious thing that everyone kind of expects out of a film about the room. And it actually took me by surprise about how different it was and how dark it was and how horribly Tommy treated Greg. And I think I didn't read Greg Sestero's biography before the film came out, so I had no idea what the actual behind the scenes was like in the film. So to see that on screen was very whoa. I did not expect that to have happened, and I think everybody in it is really well cast and
Oh
good
yeah,
script, great. But I definitely agree with the changing of tones. It did throw me off at times. I agree with you there.
I
But can we just talk about the best casting decision? And that was Zac Efron.
well, I didn't recognize him as the drug dealer until the actual scene in the cinema when it's the opening, the premiere, and he literally sat next to him as like, "Oh, you were in the film too." I was like, "Where did Zac Efron come from?"
He was so funny. Like, people give Zac Efron a lot of flack, but he was actually really good in the film.
He was. Like, people don't give Zac Efron enough credit because he's actually a really good actor.
He is.
Like, people just think of him as Troy Bolton from High School Musical, and because it was Disney Channel, that's all they think about. And I'm like, have you not seen The Greatest Showman?
Charlie St. Cloud, anyone?
17 again?
Oh no, don't remind me about that film.
I've never actually watched it.
Yeah, don't.
Okay.
No, but my favourite character in the whole film has to be Sandy, played by Seth Rogen. Because his mood throughout the entire film was just great. He looked so done.
I feel like Seth Rogen as Sandy is me to movie.
Did you find yourself in him?
I did.
The character spoke to you.
Yeah. Like, don't get me wrong, where it's a funny film, and the dark bits really do hit very well when you get used to the tone shift again. But there were just parts where I was watching the movie and I'm like, well, I guess this is a credit to the acting and the writing and the directing, especially from James Franco, considering he directed it as well as acted in it.
Mm.
But like, I was just so done with Tommy as a character. I just could not stand him. And I'm like, no, I wouldn't touch you if I had a 10-foot pole. Stay away from me. And you're on my iPad, and I still can't stand you.
And it's kind of dangerous as well, because if you have a main character that's really unlikable, you're not going to want to watch the rest of the film because you're not wanting to see them succeed, really. And even though The Room definitely did not succeed, it succeeded in the fact that people know what it is, and Tommy Wiseau became a little bit famous out of it, which is what he wanted. And knowing that that was the outcome, you kind of don't want it to happen to him.
I feel like the reason it worked is because even though Tommy was the main character, we were more following Greg's story. So we saw
Yeah.
Tommy from Greg's point of view more. It was easier to sympathize with Tommy in some parts because we were sympathizing through Greg.
Like, I remember I was watching this film with my parents, and it was the first time they'd seen it, and they had not seen The Room. So to them this was just a film about making a really bad film, but I had to sort of explain to them that The Room is definitely a real thing. And the scene where Bryan Cranston gets a cameo in this film, which I think is absolutely hilarious, but the scene where he offers him an audition and then Greg Sestero actually ends up getting the little bit role.
Yeah.
In I think it was Malcolm in the Middle.
Yes.
And then Tommy Wiseau's like, no, you can't do it. My parents and I were just like, no, Greg, go and do Malcolm in the Middle. Please go and do it. Please go and do it. And obviously, you know that he didn't do it.
I was so mad. I was like, Greg.
I was so angry.
I was like, Greg, it's not worth it.
I mean, I know it's all hindsight, but if I'd have been Greg in that moment, I would have been like, no, I'm doing Malcolm in the Middle.
And I'm pretty sure no one on the cast of the crew would have blamed him.
No, they wouldn't.
I mean, he wasn't even leaving the movie. All he asked was for a day or two off and just move one scene. But because it wasn't all about Tommy, he couldn't let it slide.
At least you know that people are going to watch Malcolm in the Middle. This movie could have ended up bombing and nobody would have seen it.
Is it fair to say that Tommy was gaslighting Greg?
I think that's more than fair to say.
Yeah, because like whenever Greg seemed to be on the opposing side, he always pulled out the fact that he wrote this script for Greg and that he created a part just for Greg, and the fact that he was the one that pushed Greg to come to LA and he was the one that gave him a place to live. This whole half of this episode has just been me ranting about how much I hate Tommy.
Some of it we maybe have to take with a grain of salt because we don't know how much of the story is actually just dramatized for entertainment.
Yes, but then when like Greg was making attachments outside of Tommy or outside of acting in general, he tried to control him, steer him away.
But it definitely didn't paint Tommy in a good light, and I'm actually pretty surprised that he had a part to play in it.
That was funny, I'm not gonna lie. The end credit scene.
So good.
That was brilliant.
I wasn't expecting it as well. I wasn't expecting Tommy Wiseau to actually be featured, but there he was in all his glory.
Real Tommy and James Franco Tommy just playing off each other. I'm not gonna lie, like I kind of had mixed feelings throughout the movie, and it wasn't really until the ending of the movie that I decided, no, okay, I do like this film. And it was like the shots showing the original Room and their recreations of certain scenes. I was like, okay, I like this. And then that end credit scene, I was like, okay, I do like this film.
I think the recreations were very, very good. Like, they could have been really awful, like a bad SNL sketch, but they actually pulled it off.
If you ever want a crash course on the Room one-liners, just watch that scene.
That was the point I'm making. I can't believe that Tom Wiseau said yes to this film being broadcast because it doesn't really show him in a great light, especially when you see how he treated Greg all the way through, and not just Greg as well.
The way he treated
the way he treated Juliet was a bit awful,
especially in the bed scene.
Yes, yeah, that was a scene that I felt was a little too off for this film, like especially with the tone that it sort of generated.
Yeah.
I mean, if this happened, then fair enough. It deserves to be, highlighted that he did sort of offend her in an awful way. But I don't know. It just sort of felt like, oh, we're going there now. Oh, right, okay. I was just laughing in the last scene, but go on.
For context, basically, they're filming the sex scene that we talked about previously, and Tommy wasn't in the best mood, and he very much, being the director, was trying to take control and not really caring about the thoughts and feelings of his fellow actors, Juliet, who played Lisa. I don't want to say nothing bad happens because it's very bad, but it's not the worst, but that's not an excuse, you know what I mean?
Mm.
It's not good.
It's not good. And I can't believe that they kept that in, especially if Tommy was still in the film. Like, the whole thing is just very interesting to me. I don't know why. It's just one of those things that I'm just like, how did this film get made? And now I'm wondering, how did the Disaster Artist get made? With, you know, having the main character be so unlikable and then having that main character be a real person who had a role to play in this film behind the scenes. I mean, it's brave. I'll give it that, but it's just not what you want people to know about you, you know? But I thought those scenes were very well acted and
Yeah,
all of that sort of
yeah,
stuff. I think it was just the events. And it's like I said before, we don't know how much of it is sort of over the top or dramatized, but for something like that, you kind of have to think that it did happen like that, because why would they lie?
yeah.
But yeah, overall, I really liked it, considering that I was expecting it to be really bad. And it got quite a good acclaim as well. I mean, it got nominated for an Oscar, and then James Franco won a Golden Globe for his
Yeah.
performance. So it did better than The Room.
Well, according to IMDb, it got 80 nominations
That's
and
mental.
won over 30 awards in all. So, yeah, definitely better off than The Room.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think it deserves it, because it's harder than it looks trying to recreate scenes. And because of how big The Room is, people will know every single intonation, every single slight movement that's off. Especially when you're putting them side to side like that. You have to be on the dot. I can just imagine how many takes it took to get it exactly right.
Speaking of, there was one thing that stood out to me straight away, and I'm like, that's not right. And that was the drug dealer scene in The Room is on the roof, but they filmed it in the alleyway in The Disaster Artist.
Oh my god, they
But
did.
then when you watch the premiere, this they show it this a part of the scene of Lisa and her mother confronting Denny about the drugs, and that's on the roof.
I didn't notice this. Now I'm annoyed. Why? Why did they do that?
it's it's the live action Lion King singing "Can You Feel the Love Tonight" during the day all over again.
So overall, The Room is a disaster piece and a worldwide phenomenon.
Yeah, and The Disaster Artist is a critically acclaimed, Oscar-nominated masterpiece.
Two absolutely different things, but we love to see it. So I think this concludes today's episode.
That is The Room and The Disaster Artist.
I just honestly can't believe that this whole thing is a thing.
It was definitely an interesting weekend watching these two movies back to back.
So, if you enjoyed this episode, then we have a Facebook page. So remember to give us a like on that, because we can update you with every single thing that we're doing at this moment. Obviously, we won't be updating you about everything because we do have personal lives, but podcast wise, you'll know everything. And we are also on every podcasting platform you can think of, including Spotify, Google Podcasts, Breaker, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Anchor, and we also have a YouTube channel. So subscribe to that as well.
Let us know what you thought about the episode. If you've watched The Room, if you've watched The Disaster Artist, what did you think? Are you one of the people who may actually prefer The Room? Because I'm sure there's someone out there who prefers The Room.
If you are one of those people who prefer The Room, let us know. Let's
Now, I'd be
talk.
generally intrigued by it.
Hmm. Do wonder. You do wonder.
And with that being said, see you next week.
See you next week.